Hey guys, Pete here. In my video the other day, I talked about the new history and lore clip that was circulating around as a promo for the Season 6 DVD's release. Today I'm going to talk about that and how it's related to Bran's story going forward and his purpose in the end of the series. This video is mostly speculating about already known facts, but could have some spoilers if you aren't caught up with the TV show through Season 6. Make sure you stick around to the end of this video to learn how you can win a copy of the 20th anniversary edition of A Game of Thrones, the book. Now let's get started. If you're not familiar with the history and lore clips for the DVD sets, they're short clips that discuss different bits of history from the Song of Ice and Fire books that don't get fully addressed in the show. They're a cool way to learn things if you haven't read the books, and for book readers, they're also fun to watch because they're animated and they're really well put together. Anyways, they released the first one early with a list of the other 17 that will be included with the DVD set. The one we're talking about today is titled The Children of the Forest versus the First Men, and it's narrated by Max van Sydow, who played the Three-Eyed Raven. It's an old story that I think most people know, but they also added a couple minor things based on show canon, which is why I decided to make the video. Really quick, I'll explain the conflict between the children and the First Men. If you want to know more details, go watch the clip or read about it on, Westeros.org, or read the section in the World of Ice and Fire book. Before the First Men, the children of the forest reigned supreme on the continent of Westeros. It was basically just them and giants who lived there, and even though they fought each other from time to time, neither side really cared to dominate the continent. There weren't that many children or giants, so there was no urgency for resources or land and things like that. Then, about 12,000 years before the current events that we see in Westeros right now, the First Men arrived from Essos. They traveled across the land bridge that connected the two continents, which was called the Arm of Dorne. The First Men were different in that they built huts and villages, and to do this they had to cut down trees, and they burned them and cleared land and all that stuff. This was in direct conflict with the children who worshipped trees, so they declared war on the men. It's a clash of cultures basically. The children live in harmony with the land for the most part and have a small footprint as far as things go. The First Men have large numbers and they farm. They clear land to make space for this, and they build dwellings, which takes up a lot of resources. The two things don't mix, and it's basically the same as the story of Europeans colonizing the United States. The native people who lived there for what seemed like forever suddenly found there wasn't enough room for them in their own land. Much in the same way that the Native Americans tried to fight back against the Europeans, the children of the forest declared war on the First Men. But there was a big problem because the First Men had a technological advantage. They had weapons they made out of bronze, leather and shields, and they also rode horses. The children had arrows and spears made of dragon glass, which weren't very effective against the First Men's shields. And their armor was made of woven bark, which was no match for their bronze swords. So the First Men were bigger and stronger with a clear advantage in weaponry. The children were losing the war, and at the same time they were losing the only home they ever knew. Unlike the Native Americans who suffered that exact fate, in this world there's magic, and that was one category where the children had a clear advantage. It's said through the magic of the Green Seers they destroyed the Arm of Dorne in the south and tried to do the same in the neck to cut off the First Men from traveling north. They failed in their attempt to split Westeros in two, which only succeeded in flooding the neck, creating bogs and swamps and stuff like that. This is something that's always been referred to as legend, but in the clip it talks about it as there are, their actual events that happened. Eventually the two sides made a pact that brought about 4,000 years of peace. The children gave up all the lands of Westeros besides the deep woods, and in return the First Men agreed not to cut down any more weirwood trees. This led to the Age of Heroes, where things basically went well for both sides. The men adopted the children's gods, which are now referred to as the old gods, and they even started carving faces into the weirwoods, creating heart trees. The children taught them some of their magic and taught them how to use ravens to communicate over long distances. In those days, the ravens would actually speak the message, and the green seers of the children would change their skins to speak through the birds. When the others came during the long night, the First Men and the children had to join forces. This is a whole other story which we know ended with the Night's Watch being formed and the wall being built. That's pretty much the short version of the story, which the history and lore clip adds more detail to. What stands out about the clip though is that it adds in some parts that aren't aren't usually associated with the story. They're not unknown or anything, but it caught me when I was watching that they were added to the story, and it was probably on purpose. They mentioned the things from the world of Ice and Fire, like that the Green Seers use the animals like direwolves and shadowcats and all that. Then they added that the children believed that the first men weren't only cutting down weirwood trees, but when they saw what happened, they didn't see white stumps. They saw their ancestors who were now lost forever. It says that the first men didn't know that the children believed that their spirits entered the trees after they died. It goes on that the children didn't have any letters or runes, so all of their history, songs, and prayers, only the trees remembered that stuff. This isn't exactly new information, but most of it could actually be deduced from reading the entire series, but it is new in relation to the story of their motivation in the story of the children versus the first men. In the World Book, it doesn't include this expressly, and it doesn't include the next bit at all, since it's something that's only been revealed in the show thus far. Clip talks about the desperation the children experienced and how they looked to their Green Seers for help. As mentioned, it says they broke the Armadorn, which isn't necessarily considered true by the Maesters, but it talks about it as fact, and then it adds, fearing extinction, the children combined their powers for one last spell that would save their people and their land from the invaders. By themselves, the children were too few to stop the onslaught, but if they could turn men's numbers against them, it just trails off there after confirming when the children created the White Walkers. We learned that in show canon at least, that the children created the White Walkers as a last-ditch effort to save their people and their lands. There's no evidence that this had any effect on anything though, since it goes on to tell the story of the pact that ended the war. It just says after hundreds of years of war, the wisest of both sides met on the Isle of Faces in the God's Eye to make peace. It doesn't mention the Order of Green Men, which is a bummer as far as I'm concerned, because that's something I've always hoped that we would eventually get to see in this part of the story. But after that, it shows Bran, and it says that after the dawn must come the night. The great evil that the children unleashed in the world returned centuries later. Only an alliance between the children and men could stop it. Again, not new information, but in this context, leads to some foreshadowing in my opinion. It wraps things up by saying that now it comes again, referring to the White Walkers, when the children are just a shadow of what they once were and men have long forgotten. But the trees remember, and Brandon Stark must learn. Or as we watch the first men, so will we watch the last. So I think these small changes are some pretty important stuff. There are many theories about Bran's role in the end of the story, but this clearly ties it to him learning what needs to be done to save humanity in the war to come. If you watch my Bran and the Three-Eyed Raven video, you know that I think he's always been set up to play a crucial role, and I think that this backs that up. Ever since the Hold the Door episode, there have been countless theories about Bran time traveling and being all these older Bran Starks or whatever that I've never been on board with. First, if that was his purpose in the story, what does this have to do with what's going on right now? Is there some connection with him realizing this and somehow that helps Westeros understand how to win the war for the Dawn? To me, it makes a lot more sense that he draws on the information that the trees have to learn what needs to be done. In the books, the Three-Eyed Crow tells him that he uses the trees to see, but eventually will be able to look far beyond them. In the show, we've seen this happen. He's able to see Jon's birth without a tree in sight, and this is something that the Three-Eyed Raven led him to. There are a lot of interesting theories about what the weirwoods are and what they represent. This clip tells us that the children's history and basically all they've known or were is contained inside there. The most popular theories about them talk about the weirwood net, which is not just a connection that exists through their roots being physically connected under the ground, but depending on what you read, could be a collective unconscious, detailed collection of important information, or even a sinister hive mind that would sound pretty far out there if George R.R. Martin hadn't written sci-fi books with similar themes. All of that is theory though, and we could talk about it for days since it is actually fun to think about, but with this history and lore clip, we have some clues as to what the show wants us to know about the children and Bran's importance to the end of the story. There are still big questions like why did it take the White Walkers so long to become a threat, and were the children just bound by their pact with men so that when the time came they decided to fight against the others, or did they realize that their creation was out of control to the point that it wouldn't just destroy the men, but that the children would be wiped out along with the rest of the world in the process. I want to point out one passage from the first book that hints at Bran's purpose long before he arrived north of the wall to meet the three-eyed raven face to face. He had this dream when he was in his coma back in Winterfell, and he looked past the wall, past endless forest cloaked in snow, past the frozen shore and the great blue. White rivers of ice and the dead plains where nothing grew or lived. North and north and north he looked, to the curtain of light at the end of the world, and then beyond that curtain. He looked deep into the heart of winter, and then he cried out, afraid, and the heat of his tears burned on his cheeks. Now you know, the crow whispered as it sat on his shoulder. Now you know why you must live. Why? Bran said, not understanding. Falling, because winter is coming. This is only a small part of the dream, but it's particularly important based on the history and lore additions. Bran travels to the end of the world, and what he sees there fills him with terror. It goes on, Bran looked at the crow on his shoulder, and the crow looked back. It had 3 eyes, and the third eye was full of terrible knowledge. Bran looked down. There was nothing below him now but snow and cold and death, a frozen wasteland where jagged blue-white spires of ice waited to embrace him. They flew up at him like spears. He saw the bones of 1,000 other dreamers impaled on their points. He was desperately afraid. Can a man still be brave if he's afraid? He heard his own voice saying, small and far away, and his father's voice replied to him, that is the only time a man can be brave. Now, Bran, the crow urged, choose, fly or die. Death reached for him, screaming. Bran spread his arms and flew. Now, he wakes up after this, and so you could explain it all away if you wanted to. To me, though, it sounds like he looked into the heart of winter to see a terrifying threat to mankind, and then came out with a purpose. The clip says, the trees remember, and Bran must learn, or else man will basically be wiped out. Bloodraven had influence over what Bran saw in this dream, and we could take the thousands of other dead dreamers to mean that Bran is being tested. By choosing to fly, he's accepting responsibility to play a part that only he can play. So, what do you think about all this? Do you think that the slight changes in the clip are put there as hints? How does it fit with the theories you already had about Bran and his purpose in the story? For me, it strengthens my position that he isn't one of the heads of the dragon. He isn't being set up as a time traveler that's all the Brandon Starks throughout history, and doesn't need to skin change any dragons for that matter. It reinforces the theory that Bran is on his own path, which is separate but equal to those of the 3 heads. I'd really like to hear what you guys think though, and maybe I'll make some more videos about the different Bran theories. Please like the video if you enjoyed it, and please subscribe to my channel. Please follow me on social media networks by clicking on the links in the description or my channel's main page. Also, check out some other of my videos while you're here. As mentioned in the beginning, I have a book giveaway going on. When I hit 28,000 subscribers, I'll pick one commenter and send them a copy of the new 20th anniversary edition of A Game of Thrones. I'll put an Amazon link in the description so you can give it a look if you haven't seen it yet. It's really nice looking, and I'll put a link for the DVD set there too, since it's now out and shipping. All you have to do to win the giveaway is just be a subscriber and leave a comment on this video or any other video where I mention this giveaway. To see how I picked the winner, you can check out my Dragonstone video, because at the end of that one, I picked the winner of the last giveaway. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you soon.